my government is going to do is to use all of the powers of the federal government, including the emergency powers.
Wow, quite the development we've got here. Welcome back to Moose and Loose. My name's David. Today we're finding it was Mark Carney was behind the locking of the bank accounts for the Freedom Convoy. He was the man pushing for all of this. We got Pierre Poilievre announcing more new plans to save Canada, this time policies directed to trades workers who travel a lot for work, whether it's the logging industry, mining industry, oil fields, any of that. Let's jump into this. We've got the food professor here. It says yesterday our own dean's office at Dalhousie University shared an op-ed written by a colleague that openly endorsed Mark Carney and the Liberals in the middle of an election. Not one person expressed any concern, not one. Can't imagine how the community would have reacted if it had been a pro-conservative piece. Honestly, I'm sick of this. Yeah, this is disgusting what's going on in our country. Got this one from Economic Woes. It says, why are Canadian grown strawberries more expensive than US grown? $3 versus $7. Who's effing who? We have some sort of domestic tariffs on ourselves. We're getting tariffed by our own. This is absurd. It's absolutely insane. Meanwhile, we got Rebel News coming out with another very spicy ad attacking Mark Carney.
Mark Carney agrees with Hamas.
D'accord avec Hamas. D'accord avec Hamas.
So do they. If he wins, we lose our streets forever. Is this your Canada or theirs?
That is short and to the point. This image here at the end says it all. So we got this article here. It says it's time to end the sedition in Ottawa by enforcing the law and following the money. Sedition, treason, insurrection, mutiny. This article is about saying the Freedom Convoy was trying to overthrow the government. That is not what it was about. So first off, let's take a look at the Freedom Convoy timeline here. So we've got the world event that happened in 2022. It says January 13th, CBC Radio reports that government has mandated all truck drivers crossing the border must be poked. This started to escalate. People start gathering. So by the late January here, the convoy starts up. Basically by the 29th, many supporters protest in Ottawa. The people arrive, honking horns, bouncy castles, all that good stuff. Peaceful protesting, much more peaceful than we've seen from Palestinian protests. Let's call it as it is. By February 5th, the Daily Hive says protesters barbecued food, played hockey, and set up bouncy castles with their children to play in. Global News reported 1,000 vehicles and 5,000 people. Something as interesting happened on February 7th. Before we look at that, we'll look at February 14th. So Justin Trudeau invokes the Emergencies Act on February 14th, as we see here. So FinTrack temporarily powers to monitor transactions and potentially freeze accounts. So they did. They froze bank accounts. They froze a lot of bank accounts. What we're talking about here today is this. This article comes from February 7th, 2022. This is a week before Justin Trudeau froze the bank accounts of Canadians. Well, where did Justin Trudeau get the idea? Who was pushing it? Mark Carney contributed to the Globe and Mail. This article is Mark Carney's words. Mark Carney is an Ottawa resident and former governor of the Bank of Canada and Bank of England. Really? Is he an Ottawa resident, or was he living in America and just owns a house in Ottawa? The goals of the leadership of the so-called Freedom Convoy were clear from the start: to remove from power the government that Canadians elected less than 6 months ago. Their blatant treachery was dismissed as comic. So it goes on to say here, on the first weekend, there's peaceful objectives, but now in the second week, no one should have any doubt this is sedition. Mark Carney painting an image here that Canadians are overthrowing the government. Somehow I don't picture bouncy castles as a part of an insurrection of the government. They're not patriots. This is not about restoring freedom, but beginning anarchy. This isn't getting carried away at a rally. It's not a rush of blood to the head. It's deliberate and calculated, and because of that, they must know that from now on, there will be consequences for their actions. The constant blaring of horns at all hours, the bugging of people, the culture of fear will bankrupt our businesses, and if left unchecked, would help achieve the convoy's goal of undermining our democracy and rule of law. Those who are still helping to extend this occupation must be identified and punished to the full force of the law. Oh, really? Mark Carney, not a fan of the Freedom Convoy. Drawing the line means choking off the money that financed this occupation. Cutting off the bank accounts was Mark Carney's idea. He posted it a week before. He was Justin Trudeau's advisor. Justin Trudeau made the ultimate decision to do it. Jumping ahead, Mark Carney's suggestion here to Justin Trudeau turned out to be unconstitutional. But by now, anyone sending money to the convoy should be in no doubt you are funding sedition. Foreign funders of an insurrection insurrection interfered in our domestic affairs from the start. Canadian authorities should take every step within the law to identify and thoroughly punish them. The involvement of foreign governments and any officials connected to them should be identified, exposed, and addressed. I know from experience that crises don't end by themselves. You can't spin your way out of failure. You must recognize the scale of the challenge, devise a clear plan, and implement it methodically and deliberately. Your determination to do so can never be in doubt. Then and only then can order be restored. In this case, that means enforcing the law, following the money. Individuals must be held responsible for their lawlessness, and those who finance their actions must be dissuaded from ever doing so again. This is scathing stuff. Mark Carney was 100% behind pushing Trudeau, whispering in his ear to lock down bank accounts. That really ruined a lot of people's lives. That cost a lot of hell in people's lives. This man cannot be prime minister. It's gross that he's even our temporary prime minister, unelected prime minister. Seems very likely that Justin Trudeau invoked the Emergencies Act because Mark Carney told him to do so. Mark Carney has been arm in arm with the Liberal establishment for years. They wanted to have him as prime minister for the longest time. You can see it here on his Wikipedia page. Carney was approached by the Liberal Party to run for leader in their 2013 leadership election. They wanted him instead of Justin Trudeau. He ultimately declined to do so. So Mark Carney's probably had a lot of pull in this party for a long time. Now, we haven't forgot about this clip already, have we?
And something that my government is going to do is to use all of the powers of the federal government, including the emergency powers of the federal government, to accelerate the major projects that we need in order to build this economy and take on the Americans.
Now, there is a distinction there to be made. Emergency powers different than the Emergencies Act, but no normal prime minister talks like that. They don't talk about using emergency powers to get things done. And what's really bizarre about this too, he talks about how people should be punished. Well, how about the people who rob banks? You see guys driving up to a bank like Scotiabank with a backhoe and they just rip out an ATM out of the building. These people don't get punished. Home invaders, people come in with their pew-pews, stealing cars and breaking enters. These people get an ankle bracelet and they go home. They play Xbox, some home arrest. That's not punishing people to the full extent of the law like he says in this article. It should really make Canadians wonder who this guy is. Is he some friendly banker, or does he have a dark, sinister agenda? His actions speak as loud as his words here. The whole situation recently with Donald Trump and Mark Carney is very suspicious. But one person who will actually stand up for Canada is Pierre Poilievre.
Luke Couture with CTV News. The campaign director for Ontario Premier Doug Ford, Corey Tonight, says you sound like Donald Trump. So if conservatives are saying that you sound too much like Donald Trump, how can you possibly stand up to the U.S. president?
Well, I'm the only one who will stand up to the U.S. president. I see that the president wants the Liberals back in because after a decade, a lost Liberal decade, with costs and crime up and the economy down under the American thumb, the president would love nothing more to keep the Liberals in power so that he can keep abusing our economy and taking advantage of Canada. The question Canadians will have to answer is whether they think the Liberals are owed a fourth mandate after they drove up costs and crime and weakened our economy, or whether it's time to put Canada first with a new Conservative government that will axe taxes, green light projects, build homes, bring home the jobs so that we can stand up to the Americans from a position of strength.
The interaction with Carney and Trump is very bizarre. The fact that Carney came back with counter tariffs, and then when they questioned Carney on his press conference, he refused to say them again. He's too scared of pissing off Donald Trump. Still voting for Pierre, and April 29th, he'll be your prime minister too. Should note too, this question by Michael Couture from CTV was really dumb, saying he sounds like Trump. What kind of dumb question is that? Legacy media will say anything to give more power to Liberals. It's disgusting. What they're not showing you in the media is how many people really show up for Pierre. The numbers are 5 times more or more than what Mark Carney's getting. This one was at Surrey. This is outside after his event. So what's important to note about this video, just take a look at this crowd here. There's a lot of young kids in here.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
The man's loved by the people.
Take a quick photo. Thank you, brother. Thank you.
Look at this. He doesn't need a big security detail like Justin Trudeau or Mark Carney. He's not hated by the public.
See you. Thank you very much. Oh, God. Love you guys. Thank you. You're my idol. Right on.
We'll see what happens at the election. Next up, we got Pierre Poilievre coming out with some more plans to help Canadians. Once again, what does Mark Carney come out with? Nothing.
Imagine you're a pipe fitter who has to travel from Timmins to Fort Mac, or an oil worker who has to travel from Nova Scotia to offshore fields in Newfoundland. These are the people who build our country, and there are whole communities of them. I've met these workers as I've crossed the country over the last several years, whether they're flying up to Northern Ontario to work in logging operations or mines, or traveling to the British Columbia interior from Alberta to build the liquefaction facilities there. And to do their jobs, they have to travel often 20 times a year, and yet the Carney Trudeau Liberals only allow them to write off $4,000 worth of travel expenses. But you know who doesn't have any limits on what they can write off? Corporate CEOs. CEOs are able to write off their private jets to fly all over the place, even when it would be just as easy to take a commercial flight. Oftentimes, corporations write off these private jets for their CEOs and other executives to benefit from the luxury of global travel, all while their workers make too little money and their consumers pay far too high prices. This is an abuse of our tax system. That's why I'm announcing today that common sense conservatives will stop corporations from writing off private jets used for luxury executive travel. We will only allow corporations to write off the equivalent of a commercial airline flight. And we will pass the Tax Fairness for Traveling Trades Workers Act, allowing our trade workers to write off the full cost of their food, transportation, and accommodation for any job-related trips that go more than 120 kilometers, regardless of whether they require lodgings. We also
This is so smart. This is going to get Pierre some votes for sure.
ensure that charter flights to remote locations with no commercial flight options will be exempt from my law, so that no tradespeople are impacted when they travel to remote areas for work. Trades workers deserve the same tax rules as CEOs when they travel to get the job done.
It's another great plan. Every day he's got a new one. How many of you would this benefit? More fantastic policy proposals that helps the working class bring it home. Pierre's for the people, Carney's for the WEF. Check out this. We got bloc leader Blanchet saying Mark Carney is essentially dodging the election process. He's trying to evade the entire situation. And at the end of this press conference, when they start talking about Mark Carney's plagiarism, CBC cuts it off quickly.
Briefing about supply management. Let's listen.
Monsieur Carney n'a pas de mandat.
Has no mandate at this point.
Par personne.
He has been elected by no one. He's taking every opportunity to evade
Et ne pas faire de campagne
and
électorale.
not
Et seule
engage
l'élection-
in
seule
an
l'élection
election
lui donnerait un
campaign.
mandat.
And only an election can give him a mandate. And Mr. Carney seems to assume, and this is the basis of his strategy, that the cause is finished. He will remain Prime Minister after April 2nd. But I have news for Mr. Carney. He may be in the opposition after April 2nd, and he therefore would be only a small manager himself.
D'abord, difficile de devenir
I mean,
député parce que aller à la cafétéria de la Chambre des
you know, he
communes,
might
c'est pas
find
les
it
méditerranéens,
difficult to be in the House of Commons, but he may end up in a lesser position himself. And the last thing is,
J'ai fait faire le calcul là, depuis le
I've been doing the calculation since the number of elections and candidates in Quebec. There are many, many Bloc Québécois members who have been elected. So saying to the people who elected those members that he doesn't respect their choice. Every elected member from any political party in Parliament has the same legitimacy as the Prime Minister or any other minister who are first and foremost members of parliament. And in fact, we've seen prime ministers that hadn't been members of parliament. Mr. Carney has never been a member of parliament, and he's never negotiated free trade either. He knows no more about free trade than I do. So I'm going to treat Mr. Carney with respect and Mr. Poilievre with respect, but not showing respect for the Bloc in a democracy is lacking respect for Quebecers.
Wow, he's just blasting him here. Mark Carney, I mean, he is essentially he dodges as many questions as possible because he's a chronic liar and he's got a lot of skeletons in his closet. So right towards the end, they start bringing up Mark Carney's plagiarism.
There's some discussion about plagiarism in a PhD thesis. Listen, I think we have to be cautious here. I remember...
All right, friends, we've been taking you live to Quebec, where Bloc Québécois leader Yves-François Blanchet has been speaking to reporters.
Better quickly go away from that. We don't want our beloved Mark Carney to get exposed for who he is. What a load of crap. Our media is just the worst. We have probably among some of the most corrupt media in the world. How can anybody see this and not see CBC liberal bias? After seeing all that, seeing Mark Carney's words, is he really in this for Canadians?